All right. Thank you. No. Hello. All right, we're working. What a great little movie, hey? There were so many things there that I just find inspirational, and the resilience of nature, and this fire. To me, I'm so passionate about fire because everything we've spoken about this afternoon can come together with fire. Community, culture, language, songlines, stories, it's all there. To have a fire and walk with fire, there's something so special about that. The things you see, the things you hear, it's a deep connection, and it's in all of us. Yeah.
I'll just follow on from what Rhys said. Like that education around fire is really important as well. So not seeing it as something to fear. We use fire for warmth. We use fire to cook on. We use fire for healing. We use fire, for light. There's different perspectives on fire. It's not always a big, bad, ugly thing. And in this instance, it's a mechanism and a tool that can help reset and rejuvenate country. I love this dude. We've spent many dangerous times in some pretty hectic fires together. And I've been watching over him while he's out on the fire ground, and it's been pretty hectic because country has not been managed. So, we've been involved in some pretty hairy, full-on fires throughout New South Wales over the last 20 years. Every time we'd see each other, passing each other, jumping into helicopters or, just coming off fire line, etc., we'd acknowledge that we're still alive, but then also acknowledge that things have to change and we can't be doing this way all the time. It's just dangerous. But on that, I just wanted to sort of also mention, as part of this plan, we've developed our own seasonal calendar. And one of the important things, following on from what Rhys said, is having a look at this whole seasonal cycle that happens on Gumbaynggirr country. We live close to the equator. As you move towards the North and South Pole, that's where you get these distinct components of seasonality, the four that we work with today, which is that summer, winter, autumn, spring. Yeah. So as you're on those sort of polar areas, they're really distinct and really changeable. As you move further towards the equator, which is where we sit, that variation becomes very wide, and it becomes almost into the fact that you don't have 4 seasons, you have 5, 6, 7 seasons. So the first thing is in people being educated and understanding that these seasons are not just your standard 4 seasons. Like you guys have noticed a couple of weeks ago, we went into a little bit of change on Gumbaynggirr country. We started seeing the Jezebel butterflies starting to migrate up the coast, indicated that the fish are on their way coming as well. Yeah, so it's all these knowledge systems that then interplay into this sort of process. And that contributed also to our koala plan, is making sure that all these different processes that we need to do to manage country are incorporated into the timing and the seasonality of what's happening on country. The indicators that are also on country, the things that tell us when to do things. So it's country speaking to us, and it's speaking to us through our kin. And we need to be able to identify those cues and then to be able to enact on those cues. But at the moment, it's really difficult because we're dealing with these government processes that still want to fight. They want to fight fire. Whereas what we need to be doing is embracing fire and having it as part of our seasonal cycle and as part of our seasonal operation and how we live.
Yeah, thanks, Chels. I think the other thing the video illustrates is that there are people from our community, not just these two, who have this collective knowledge in the now. All those people on that video, I know them all, and they're worth listening to. And on this seasonality and using fire, I suppose a little bit of a history thing for you all. You might not be aware of this, but when Sydney was settled, there was a fellow named Pemeloy, and he used fire as a weapon. And this set a tone for non-Aboriginal land management for 200 and whatever years. So, yeah, this is a big sort of turnaround, sort of let's look at this sort of stuff differently. Let's use this tool and get better objectives, better results for everyone. Look, yeah, and what we're talking about is moving away from fire suppression to fire mitigation. And that's these guys would probably understand that a whole lot.
All right, so just 1 second. I just want to, like moving into the future with more cultural fire in our landscape, we have challenges. So some of those challenges are altered landscapes through past practices, other land use. We have more people in the environment now. There's more houses, more assets. Our bushes thickened up from lack of fire. So these are some of the challenges we've got to, face. We haven't got access to like trucks and tankers and stuff, so we're still relying on government agencies. These are the things we've got to work through and move into the future with, but we still have to make a start. Now, if we all live on Gumbaynggirr country, we're all Gumbaynggirr custodians, right? We're here, we've got to look after country. And part of that is managing land, and I want to just plant that seed in everyone here that we have that responsibility to where we live. Yeah?
Any questions?
Yeah, preach it, bro. No worries. Use my platform.
Is there any questions?
I have a question.
Yeah, go on.
You're talking about traditional fire management and how for the last 200 years, we've had this adversarial view of fire. Are you finding that there is an appetite or an increasing appetite to change the way we view fire so that we can sort of start to make these changes? Like rural fire brigade services still are the old, dropping incendiary devices, that kind of stuff?
Just anecdotally, I can tell you there is, just recently working with Landcare, they have a lot of proponents who want to see this stuff, but as Rhys mentioned, in urban environments, it's a lot harder to embrace. Let's burn this place, or no, we can't because there's a house there. So, yeah. But yes, a lot of people, non-Aboriginal people, want to see this sort of stuff happen.
Yeah, I'll just back that up. I'll confess. I also work for government in an organisation called Biodiversity Conservation Trust. So it's basically private land conservation. So that's me. I'll fess up. And in that in that realm, we work a lot with farmers throughout New South Wales and property owners. And a lot of these are properties that have been in families for a very long time. And the appetite within there is heaps as well. I think a lot of Australians and a lot of people in New South Wales after the recent fires are starting to realise that fire is an integral part of the landscape. Aboriginal people hold the knowledge of how to undertake that process. So what do we need to do? At the moment, the New South Wales government has got a New South Wales fire strategy team that are looking at how we sort of make this an everyday occurrence. But obviously, it's a government document coming out of government, so it always will have those barriers and those difficulties in moving through on time. Because let's face it, we sort of know that we're moving. I said to Rhys a couple of years ago, mate, you got a short window, get your shit together and start burning. And so that's how it is. And just also on the koala front, because before 200 years ago, the Australian landscape was very different to what it is. It's described as parklands. It's described as lots of beautiful landscapes, rolling hills, grassy understory. This is the sort of habitat the koalas need to be able to move through. When you start getting lantana thickets, you start getting thick bush, it might look good and you might think, yeah, that's healthy and that's thriving, but it's not. The koalas need an area that they can see, they need to be able to run, and it's also good for the growth of trees. We had some, and we still do in some places, secret places, there's some really big trees still left on Gumbaynggirr country. So as well as that space is also needed for trees, for tree growth and for soil rejuvenation. So, and then to have fire inserted into it, and especially a cultural burn, it also facilitates that healthiness of country. We now deal with the terminology around 3 different types of fire, and you guys will hear the terminology of 1 is hazard reduction, 2 is ecological burning, and 3 is cultural burning. So that language is starting to also come into play as well, and they're all very different in their intent and in how they're prescribed and in how they're applied.
100% Chels. So with the cultural burn, what makes a cultural burn, hey? It's people, it's community, it's learning together, it's having our elders, it's having our kids with us. That's where that knowledge transfer happens, in that space. It's in-depth learning, it's immersion.
It's just family fun day, isn't it, Rhys? Yeah.
Questions?
Hi, thanks guys for talking. I've known about the importance of cultural burning for over a decade now, and I have moved around a bit, but I've been in the valley here for 7 years. I just really want to be involved. I don't know how to get involved and to learn about it. I've known an ecologist friend from up north in Malaami who learnt it at university, but I'm not like that way inclined. I'm not really interested in working on computers or learning in a classroom. I really want to just learn it like on the ground, like with you guys, like, and I know there's everywhere I've lived around here where I can see it really needs it really badly, where I'm living now as well, and I just really want to learn about it. And I don't know, I've never known how to really get involved properly, and I just want to know if I can.
Well, hopefully moving into the future these opportunities come up, because we need people to be interested, and we need to share that knowledge and pass that knowledge on. And the panel before us was talking about that next generation into the futures, and that's where this has got to carry. And I'm sitting here, I can hear the voices of the elders before me, them old people. I'm speaking with my voice, but their voices in my head, and they spoke with passion and with truth and meaning, and that's what we're all here for, eh? Tell those truths.
I suppose if there is something you could do in the short term, this might sound a bit, but yeah, the RFS, that's probably your angle on getting this done.
So let's think about our landscape around the Nambucca Valley here, eh? Oh, sorry, I'm crossed rivers. But looking at our landscape and our mountains, those mountains should have fire in them. At certain times a year, we should be looking up and seeing fire. And it's not there for one day. It's there for a week. It's there for a couple of weeks. It'll go out. We need to reignite that. Like we've got our road networks and our pathways. Those fires follow their own pathways and their own their paths and their ecotones and their vegetation types, and we can make a really good educated decision on where that fire is going to travel, where that fire is going to go out, and how long it's going to burn for, and we just need to be given that opportunity.
There was a parliamentary inquiry to the bushfires, and one of the recommendations that came out was the utilisation of cultural burning more. So I think collectively, in a collective voice, if you did want to do something to start with, is obviously, everyone voted today. You vote for the right people, they're going to make the right decisions, and then be inclusive of Aboriginal people in managing Australia. I said earlier, it's about time that, we jumped back in the stolen Ferrari and started to drive the Ferrari ourselves, and not be passengers in a stolen car anymore. When that car's actually driving out of control and hasn't got any direction. That's the uncertainty that you guys all feel as we move into the future, where we're not getting the right sort of leadership that we need. So one of those things is actually making your mayor, making your local MP, and then making the New South Wales government aware that you guys are behind Aboriginal people and our Aboriginal knowledge systems, and that our landscape needs that application and needs Aboriginal people in there.
Yeah, hello. Thank you for this opportunity. Regenerative farming is big. It's a really big catch cry out there. It's happening all over the country and all over the planet. They're teaching regenerative agriculture or regenerative farming at universities. So is cultural burning being placed within these streams as well? I'm sure it must be, but thought I'd bring it up.
If you jump on the internet and type in regenerative songlines Australia, so that's one of the platforms where we're looking at doing this regenerative work, is through our songlines. So starting first with regenerating our songlines throughout Australia is one of the start, because it's those songlines that hold doing this regenerative work is through our. So that's part of that regenerative system. So Indigenous ideology and Indigenous worldview is being inclusive in these regenerative processes. So I work with the regenerative farmers, so we're looking at that way of where Indigenous metaphysics can be applied to that. In regenerative design, regenerative development, that's also a component that's now taking up Indigenous ways of knowing and being and perspectives into that sort of thing as well in Australia. And it's definitely something that we're trying to do here in Gumbaynggirr country as well. So when we talk about regenerative, we also see fire as reset. So that's the first sort of thing that needs to happen first, is fire resets country. And then from the reset, you then can start managing country in the way that it needs to and wants to be managed. So that's all part of that regenerative component of what you talk about. And that's also that regenerative component of the looking after the soil as a primary aspect of it. And then also looking after kin and considering our fellow animals that share this space and this planet with us.
Yeah, thanks, Chels. Personally, I see the cultural burning as regenerative burning. That's the terminology I use for it. But as Chels was alluding to with soils and whatnot, we appreciate and have an understanding of, as everyone should. From a cultural perspective, my old people taught me to look at landscapes from underneath. We don't look from above. And that's where our story starts, because bedrock is like grandmother, and the regolith is mother, and the soil, that's like our daughter. And then as we come above, we have that same relationship with mother, daughter and grandmother, right there in front of us. So, regenerative practices is what our old people and what we aspire to do with land management now. We need to regenerate a lot of things.
It's one of those things I always talk about. We in the circles I run, when we call it Columbusing. It's where non-Indigenous people have rediscovered something that's already discovered. And there's lots of things that fit into that. One is biophilia. We've always been people that have known about biophilia, and that's not inappropriate touching of plants. That's having plants and nature in your realm. Deep ecology. Our culture is actually one of the oldest that practices deep ecology and the meaning of deep ecology. I can go on and on with a list of these encompassing terms, and the regenerative design and regenerative space is also one of those as well. So it's very much embedded in our culture, and we don't just pluck the notion of being the oldest living sustainable culture on the earth out of the air. There's reason, there's rhyme for that sort of stuff. And we have lots of fire story in Gumbaynggirr country as well.
Thank you. Last year we exceeded 420 parts per million of carbon in the atmosphere for the first time in about 4.1 million years. At that time, temperatures were about 4 degrees warmer, our oceans were 10 metres higher, and I'm just thinking that, or even the United Nations has just said that we are likely to exceed the 1.5 degree guardrail by mid-2030s. So, Chels, you've been speaking about, that you have done your PhD, in climate change. So how can Gumbaynggirr cultural burning, and even broader than that, help this Bellingen Shire Valley to be climate resilient, but more resilient more broadly?
That's a big question. I suppose when you go and get something like a DR in front of your name, you're expected to answer things like that. Look, I'm a strong believer, and I have been fortunate enough to hang out with a lot of very knowledgeable elders before me throughout New South Wales and Australia. And one of the things that, the constant variables and the constant messages is that, and it's that question about, can Indigenous ways of thinking save the planet? I think Aboriginal people and Indigenous people as a whole are one of the most resilient and adaptable peoples on the planet. And regardless of what you might be reading in reports, in many ways, Indigenous people are actually leading that adaptability and that resilience in many parts of Australia and the Pacific and the world. The only problems come is because, we are marginalised, we are minority, and we still don't have equity in the space of decision making and having our worldview put on the table and at the forefront of ways to fix and do things, and that's one of the primary issues. So if Bellingen Shire Council are open and the community are open to be inclusive of Aboriginal knowledge systems in the way we plan, adapt and become resilient in this area, we are more than happy to step up and assist as a first. The second thing I think is also being open to allow different ways of knowing and being to be in that process. So, allowing yourselves as an individual and as a collective to be open to a new ideology and a new way of doing things and new constructs in doing that is the other thing. Because it's going to be a collective of people that allows us to move forward into this unknown space together. Because as we sit, mind the language, I'm hoping the kids have gone home except you, but I won't do it then, is that, we're essentially all on this shit train together, There's no jumping off it, so all we can do is take control of where it's going and how we're living in this new and unknown realm. We've got stories, we've got storylines, we've got those embedded in the landscape that, law about how we lived and operated during those times of fluctuation and during those times. That's something that we're now willing to share and to let everyone embrace as part of becoming resilient and adaptable. And one of those things I spoke about earlier is getting to know the different seasons on Gumbaynggirr country, getting to know how the animals and the plants, our kin, how they react to these things as well, and being mindful of that. I always say to young kids and to people that I talk to is that, even just remembering when you wake up in the morning, you breathe a tree's breath and the tree breathes your breath. That's your connection. And it's a really, really important one when we start to talk about carbon and we start to talk about, issues in the atmosphere. And that's how important, landscapes are, especially here on country, because we are one of the strongholds. We are one of the places that has been resilient in the face of settlement. The Gumbaynggirr people, have always been a very giving and open people, and we still retain that today. And so we're, asking people to actually, walk with us, let us take the steering wheel for a while, see how it goes, support us, sit in the back of the bus, trust us to drive, and we'll see where we end up. We'll get there.
Thanks, Chels. I think we see the images of that in that movie. With that smoke, that beautiful light white smoke drifting up through the canopy. There's carbon sequestration right there. There's that carbon getting taken up by those trees. Next year they're going to flower heavy. They're going to promote growth and the soil's still intact. The soil's moist. There's fuel. We haven't burnt things to a crisp. You look at those first images of that country that burnt hot and cooked the canopy, that's gone into the atmosphere. So, we can make a change. It's there, we see it.
I just wanted to say thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and your passion in this area. It's really inspiring. I guess maybe you could potentially talk a little bit more about the barriers that you face to be able to do the work that you do and strategies for moving forward.
Well, we had no jealous business in this continent before fences were put up. So, look, there's the last person's question, I suppose, alluded to that idea of modes of thinking and ways of thinking, and this is the background of this cultural lensing exercise that we can take on board. So Aboriginal people, we immerse ourselves in our own culture because it is our culture, but to come back to, is there any benefit from our land management sort of ways? Well, there was 200 years ago, and for the last 200 years there's been a different mode of thinking towards, this application of how we do things. So I suppose, if I'm making a point, as non-Aboriginal people, you've got to look at yourselves in the mirror, and that might sound a bit harsh, but that's a reality, because the way that the dominant paradigm has been managing country has not been working. And even as non-Aboriginal people, you can be aware of that, and that's why you're here. And what can we do about it? I sort of start with, as individuals, what we do starts out our back door. We need to have an interconnect between places of high conservation value with where we're living, because if we're talking about impacts to environments, where people live has been the biggest impact. I don't know if any of you guys know Sydney, but we're very lucky to have this Ballinger River. The Cooks River in Sydney is the total opposite. But that, in a sense, I think illustrates where we don't want to go. And that's why I think, us more we want to be involved in this conversation, because I don't know if any of you know about the Cooks River, but I would really detest this neighbourhood to go that way. And And so, yeah, this comes back to applying these facets and these ideas from the cultural perspectives, but also good science and good community relationships with, I don't like the word sustainable. When I hear government bodies talk about sustaining, I think they're just trying to maintain the status quo. But look, in this context, that's what we're after, eh? We want to sustain ourselves and our communities, and the natural world is all part of that. Yeah, so that's a given.
I'll back Ciaron up there is that I think the word sustainable it's a non-Indigenous construct. It's been around since 1992. It's proven that it hasn't worked. It's primarily only something for big corporations to flag around in their flash documents. And sustainability with an Indigenous lens is essentially where we want to be going, just quietly, even though I'm on the mic. One of the things that, in the line of work I do is re-establishing that notion around sustainability. What does it really mean, and who is it there for? We as a collective need to go beyond the rationale and the terms of sustainability. It was primarily put in place for large corporate bodies and corporations to be able to continue developing and without guilt, I suppose. But it's proven that it's not working, and it doesn't work. And the only people that essentially benefit from it are those large bodies and corporations that make up a small majority of the planet and the area. If you guys were open to moving into a direction where we have a relook, and a retake and a reset on what sustainability really is in Gumbaynggirr country, and what sustainability really looks like in Gumbaynggirr country, we'd be more than happy to have that conversation as well. The other thing around barriers is obviously, we're a minority. We're still marginalised from lots of things. We don't have the resources that we need. We're dealing with a Westminster legislative framework. So our knowledge systems and our metaphysics around ideology do not come into any of those pieces. They don't come into any of the legislative context. They don't come into any of the policy frameworks, so to speak. And that provides one of the largest barriers for us, is being able to enable us to undertake, our knowledge and our systems when it comes to biodiversity, land management, looking after country, and our role and our place in this country.
I was wondering if I could sort of speak on more of a positive note. How do you guys feel in terms of where we're at now compared to 5 or 10 years ago? Like, from my perspective, the fact that we're having this event, and we're seeing such a re-emergence of First Nations cultures in this continent. And I think the word was floated around before, a renaissance, having a renaissance. From my perspective, seeing this re-emerge now, we're having these conversations, is such an inspiring landmark for where we are going, and we can move towards if we continue to feed this goodness of re-empowering and reconnecting and allowing Gumbaynggirr custodianship to step forward. And even from my perspective, seeing the landscape around the Ballingen Shire over the last few years, with all the rains we've had, how much happier and healthier is the land here, is the country here, just from my personal point of view living here. So just in terms of bringing forward a more positive upbeat as well to, in terms of us feeling good about it and feeding that, I wonder if you guys might have something to share in that department.
I'll make a comment, and you might not like my comment.
Sure.
I've been having this same conversation for 30 years. So that's where I sit.
Yeah, I could probably back that up, and it's mildly frustrating. Going back to that barrier thing, me and Chels kind of started at Parks long time ago, but talking of barriers, Chels is not only a woman, but which she has to try twice as hard in the patriarchy. She's an Aboriginal woman. She has to try 3 times as hard. And like, if I love her, it's because she's an achiever and she does things, and she's great to listen to. And like, what she gets confronted with is the same thing I get confronted with, though, is that thing that in our management spheres, we get managers that kind of, they're still looking down on us. They're still treating us like poor blackfellas. They're still treating us like we don't have capacity. They're still treating us like... and this is really coming back to that cultural lensing thing and taking a look at yourself. I don't know how many times I've had a non-Aboriginal person approach me, and the way they're asking or trying to get information from me is they come from a point of, oh, don't you Aboriginal, la 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 la, and it's got, no. And so we one barrier is sociopathic. That's what we are, and look, a lot of people have to deal with it. Yeah, so, you know, I don't go to bed at night, mate, feeling good about what happens between Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal Australia, because, quite frankly, I'm sick of it.
Just following on is that, you know, yeah, there are lots of positive things happening, and that's primarily because we're dealing with different generations. So generations that have been able to learn the truths about Australia is the first start, and now in a lot of our schools and our education system, that those truths are coming through. But prior to that, you know, a lot of the learning was that Aboriginal people were backwards, ugly, uninformed, dumb, lazy, drunks, you know, all that sort of stuff. And so that re-education is the first step, and that's probably why a lot of younger generations now go, oh, hang on a minute, we're being re-educated. That's not exactly the way, but, you know, when you want to take over country, the first thing you do is produce false paraphernalia, yeah? And that's what happened in this country. So, you know, speaking those truths and resetting that history is in the process, and yes, that has been the change, but Aboriginal people still are struggling. And as Nathan said earlier, you know, Aboriginal people actually own and manage a large majority of Australia, and we still don't have any sort of representation in Parliament or any sort of seat, you know, in that Ferrari, you know. We're not even there. The resources that come out of Australia are still not shared equally with Aboriginal people, you know. We still have these barriers against us. And, you know, I want to be on this boat that thinks that, you know, things are going awesomely, but I can't because I deal with it every day. And to me, the only urgency is that we're all in Shitsville together because of climate change and the uncertainty of climate change, so we need to find change. And if that change is embracing Aboriginal knowledge and knowledge systems, well, let's do it. Yeah?
And so if I'm going to implore on what Chels is saying, though, yeah, we're in Shitsville, but were Aboriginal people part of the decisions that got us to here? No. So don't put us in that boat either. But yeah, we've got to move forward all together. So that's one of these paradoxical situations.
But I'm going to turn it positive for you because I noticed that you're not wearing shoes and you're getting around in socks, which is what I do at home as well. Is that, you know, I think that you guys showing up, yeah, and then the next thing is obviously standing up, having a voice that's supportive of Aboriginal people and our plight and our endeavours is a positive approach and a positive step, hopefully, that comes out tonight. You know, us talking further with the community about how we can do this in the Bellinger Valley, and then even then, you know, use that as some sort of template that we can move into other parts of Gumbaynggirr country is fantastic. It's absolutely fantastic. And, you know, I just want to, from my heart, thank you all for coming out tonight. Thank you all for sitting there patiently and listening. And that's a very big thing in culture, is listening. And you guys have done a fantastic job of it. And thank you for giving us, you know, the platform and coming along tonight. It's been like a really, really good night to be open, honest, and to share all this stuff. And I thank you, every single one of you.
Thanks, Chels. There's some hard truths there, but we do need to listen. And but back on that positive note, for me, and this forum is a good step forward, like we're saying. But looking at nature itself, you know, coming out of those big fire seasons, you know, I was mentally done, I was physically done, but to see the resilience of nature and how nature can bounce back, we can't write it off. It is resilient, and it just needs help. And we've got to do our bit.
All right, so thanks Rhys, thanks Chels, thanks Ciaron. You know, wonderful panel. I loved it, and yeah, just love being around these three people. You know, they're just so inspiring with what they're achieving for our country and for our young people. It's just feel really proud to be Gumbaynggirr, right? So I guess takeaway is, look, this is